This is number 6 in the series that we've been doing, More Than Enough. God introduces himself as El Shaddai, and he never redefines his nature, his name, or his character. It means all-sufficient one, or the God who is more than enough. So if he's same yesterday, today, and forevermore, he was God of more than enough under the old covenant, the first covenant to the Hebrews. He's still God, the God who's more than enough to those in the new covenant, us. And of course, we see then that really the first 4 books of the Bible, after the creation account, has to do, it's almost like an anthology, giving us a snapshot of what covenant life is intended to accomplish in the life of a believer. Beginning with freedom from captivity to bondage, someone else making all the decisions that affect your life and you can't do anything about it. And it's typified by never having enough. Never having enough to even meet some areas of basic need. And then progress into the wilderness, a place of uncertainty in terms of direction and purpose, but nevertheless an opportunity to know God and grow in God. Your first encounter with the miraculous, beginning, of course, with the crossing of the Red Sea that takes them into that land, and the continuing miracles of provision that ensure that God's covenant people now, in this place in their life, get their needs met. It's not less than enough, it is now just enough, and then a progression into the land of promise, the land that flows with milk and honey, the land of more than enough. And of course, we know from 1 Corinthians 10:11 that all of these things that happened to the Hebrews or to the children of Israel in these accounts are done as in samples. It says in the King James, if you look up the meaning of the word, it is types. They are the natural seed of Abraham. We are the spiritual seed of Abraham. Everything we see them experience in the natural is a revelation to us of our progress toward our land of promise as spiritual beings. And of course, that has a natural outworking, but it is to us that we are to see these types in the Old Testament oriented toward. It's for us. And so as such, we've been studying the events and the progression that led the children of Israel from captivity, out of utter bondage and utter lack, into a land where they're now seeing the miraculous. Therefore, there's a measure of belief. They have to see to believe, but believing in any form or fashion is better than not believing. It's enough to get their needs met. And God always does that. And then, of course, all of the events that we see in the Bible are instructive to us about moving our lives today, even though we're in covenant with God, from captivity and bondage to lack, all the way through this area of uncertainty. What's God got for me? Where are we going? I hear something about a land of promise. I hear something about more than enough, but where do I fit in all of this? That's the wilderness. God will show you some things. He'll reinforce the validity of your pursuit of Him, the appropriateness of your pursuit of Him, and you'll begin to move toward your land of milk and honey, your land of more than enough, and the day will come when you step into that land if you learn these lessons. Last week we talked about one of the first experiences we saw the children of Israel having after they crossed the Red Sea. They came to the bitter waters of Marah, and they began once more to complain. They'd just seen just an absolutely, a miracle that transcended anybody's ability to explain in a natural sense. And they are now complaining because the water is bitter. They were thirsty. And that set up perfectly a discussion of what we do when we encounter bitter water in our life. When our life seems to lose its sweetness, what do we do in order to remedy the problem? And if you weren't here, you should get, a recap of that message. Today, the subtitle of our message is The Bread of Life. The bread of life, of course, is a reference to what we see called in the Old Testament manna. Open your Bibles to Exodus chapter 16 for a moment. Now, there's a lot of material that I'm not going to take the time to read. It's actually beneficial to read all of it from verse 1 through about verse 35. In the interest of time, and I would encourage you to do so, in the interest of time, I would like for you to do that on your own. You'll see it starts out in verse 1 with once more, the complaining becomes a factor. And of course, then we read verse 4, God's solution for the genesis or the root of the complaining. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a certain rate or portion every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. And then we have a number of verses that define the precise steps that were to be taken. The manna was to be gathered every morning. A manna was a little golf ball sized, or perhaps smaller, sized, white, puffy thing that was called the bread of heaven. And it sustained them and provided sustenance for them for 40 years in the desert. And of course, we see then that there are things that had to be acknowledged. You had to gather the manna. It would show up every morning like dew on the ground. And it had to be gathered before the sun came up, because the sun and the heat would scorch it, would melt it, and it would no longer be available. And it couldn't be saved. If it was kept more than a day, it would turn wormy and would be unedible. And of course, if you tried to consume it at that point or under those conditions, it would make you sick. And then there was to be enough gathered the sixth day so that the Sabbath could be recognized. And on that sixth day, the manna lasted 2 full days at that point. And of course, we see other things that are said during the description of these processes. And we hear talk about an omer being the measure by which they determine how much manna to get. But if you read, you'll see that an omer, rather than being a specific measure, and this is something that, it's been argued about by different Bible scholars and commentaries, but basically everybody has a different need. Just as today, a child doesn't eat as much as a grown adult. The ladies often don't eat as much as a much heavier, larger man as it relates to the call of God on their life and what they're to do. Their natural food consumption differs depending on size or exertion or responsibilities or whatnot. And so we see that manna is treated the same way. It says that let every man gather of it according to his eating. That's in verse 16. And then he says an omer. So it almost seems to be contradictory. But then he says again in verse 18, and when they did meet it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. And that's going to be fairly significant consideration later in the text. But the bottom line of all of this, we see in verse 31, and the house of Israel called the name thereof manna. And it was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. In verse 35, and the children of Israel did eat manna 40 years, until they came to a land inhabited. They did eat manna until they came into the borders of the land of Canaan. And so, I guess I should read verse 36. See, it once again refers to an omer. Now an omer is the 10th part of an ephah. You know, I always wondered as I read this chapter how much an omer was, and now I know. It's a 10th of an ephah. Really helps. But at any rate, an omer does play an important part in this text, as I've already said, because it has to do with, people gathering a certain amount that was particular to their need, to themselves, their requirements, and to do it every day. And at the very heart of your new life of freedom, because as we'll see, they'd only been delivered for a month and a half now from the bondage in Egypt. At the very heart of this new life of freedom from enslavement to the world is this daily provision referred to as manna. Without it, the children of Israel would have either died in the wilderness or returned to Egypt. And the exact same thing is true for us today. We must learn to gather manna in the morning. And there are a number of principles that derive from this text that we'll be examining. And first of all, manna, very simply, is the Word of God. The Bible defines this for us clearly in the New Covenant. This just isn't an ordinary, conveniently contrived statement for the purpose of this teaching. We are told in the Word what manna is to be to us. Look at John chapter 6, verse 32 for a moment. John chapter 2, verse 36. Verse 31, I guess I could start in verse 31. Our fathers did eat manna in the desert. As it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Verse 32, then Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven and giveth life unto the world. Then said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. So we see what manna refers to. It refers to more than just the Word. It does refer to the Word, because the Bible says that the Word of God is alive and powerful. The King James says quick, it means alive. The Word of God is alive and powerful, and you will part the soul from the spirit. It does a lot of things. Jesus is defined as the Word made flesh. This is where we got our name here, took our name, living Word. And so the Word that we are to partake of as our manna is alive. It is the literal person of Jesus Christ. Amen. We are to partake not only of the principles that the Word gives us for living successfully. We're not only to take the Word just enough so faith starts coming, but literally we are to partake of the divine nature. And this is our manna. And only to the extent that we follow the pattern in the Word will it have the same effect that God desires, and that is no hunger anymore. Yeah. What do you hunger for? I mean, it could be a natural hunger. It could be the kind of hunger that actually sustains biological life. It could be hunger for food. It could be hunger for sex. It could be a hunger for acceptance, for the love of another person, for fellowship and closeness with the one to whom you're married, perhaps. It could be a hunger for business success, acclaim and fame and respect and recognition. It could be hunger for more money to do things that you want to do. But notice he says that if you partake of this divine manna that's come to us in the person of Jesus Christ, you will hunger no more in any of these areas. It certainly means that you will have enough natural sustenance to sustain life, serve the same purpose as manna did to the children of Israel in the desert. But it will do far more than that. It will cause you to hunger no more. You hungered for a particular relationship that seems to evade you, a certain quality of relationship perhaps, or meeting certain expectations. Well, your solution then to figure out how to go get it, to date online, to pursue whatever marriage counseling might be available. These are not necessarily things that God won't use, but you won't be hungry for this if you have the relationship with the Lord that He's specifying here. You will find fulfillment in every area of your life if you let God do it. And the tendency is for us to say, well, I've been trying to let Him do it. I've been praying about this. I've been believing about this. I've been trying. Well, quit trying and believe. Rest your case in the Lord. His yoke is easy. Rest can be found in Him. And it's then that you've begun partaking of the manna that God has made available to you. So we see, when we talk about the Word, there are really three levels of our receiving the Word. One level is we receive principle of life, important. But that's the sole reason that some people read the Bible. They're going to gain principles so we can make good choices. Life and blessing instead of death and cursing. Hugely important. But that's just the beginning. Don't start there. Because we go on to learn that the more we inundate our minds and our hearts with the Word of God, the more faith comes. And since we serve a faith God, and it's only going to be faith that gets us to the place we want to be in God, then it's vital that you hear that word more and more. Don't just hear it enough to gain insight and understanding of the principles involved. That's hugely important. But keep on hearing it, and keep on hearing it, and it'll begin changing your belief system. I get so bummed out in the natural. That's not a spiritual truth. The people I hear say, well, I've tried that. I went to church for a year. I tithed for 2 years. I tried that. I have prayed. I have prayed for this, prayed for that, prayed for success, prayed for financial provision, prayed for a husband or a wife. I've prayed for this. Nothing's happened. I'm going to have to take some ownership of this. Do it myself. This isn't just a, let's give it a shot for a month deal.
Amen. That's right.
God isn't able to do anything in your life until you put the decision in place that says, I don't care what I see or when I see it, the Word of God is the final authority in my life. Only then will things begin to change. So you need to hear the Word enough for discernment of right and wrong decisions, for the principles that are going to govern a successful life. You need to hear it enough for faith to come. But the final step is, in partaking of that Word, if you understand what's happening, Jesus is actually imparting to you His nature, the divine nature, the qualities that He wants to imbue each one of us with will begin to be imparted as we understand that's the ultimate and final purpose. He is the living Word. And if, as we approach the Word, we see that, we are approaching Jesus Himself. This is the Lord. He's the Word made flesh. He is our heavenly manna. And as we believe this, because everything is going to be unto us according to our faith, then change will begin. And what kind of change is actually going to occur? I want you to see from the example of the children of Israel in the wilderness. Let's go back to Exodus 16 again. Verse 35, one more time. And the children of Israel did eat manna 40 years until they came to a land inhabited. They did eat manna until they came unto the borders of the land of Canaan. When you have finally arrived at the ultimate, the perfect will of God for your life, your land that flows with milk and honey, the place where you're going to experience more than enough on a regular basis, then this will be such a part of your daily experience of life. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about the particulars of when you get to your land later. You never give up the Word.
Amen.
But the approach to it changes. And we'll talk about that when we get there. At the moment, he says now, and Omar is a 10th part of an ephah. Praise the Lord. I always wanted to know that. At any rate, so you can clearly see that the provision of manna not only addressed the need for sustenance for their journey, because if you do the chronology, they had been out of the land of Egypt for exactly a month and a half. And all their provisions had begun to run out, had started running out. All of the things that they had brought to sustain them for their journey to the land of promise had run out during this process. And of course, what happens? They start complaining. Their complaints initially are directed at Moses and Aaron. God makes the point later, you're not complaining against them, you're complaining against me. Because this is the revealed purpose and will of God through those that He's placed over them. And He said, so you're complaining against me. And of course, His immediate response was to send manna. So we have to assume that the tendency to complain, which will kill you or cause you to fail in life, which we'll see in a moment, the tendency to complain, murmur, and whine about the condition of your life, to focus on all of the things that are wrong and have kept you from rising to the level of success that you wish you could have. You will live forever in a land of discontent. So let's talk about that for a moment. Manna is God's provision to deal with a spirit of discontent. And when I say a spirit of discontent, I'm not talking about a demon that is suddenly taken up residence. It is your having given your heart over to complaining, looking at life in such a way that you are voicing your discontent. Complaining cannot exist without there being a deep discontent. And the thing about that is that everything around us in this natural world tempts us to be discontented. Everything. You look at the marriage somebody else has and you don't think you do, and you're discontented with yours. You look at the progress your life has or hasn't made in some way, and you become discontented with yours. You look at your level of success and the people that make more money than you do. And after all, God's not supposed to be a respecter of persons. So why is it that I'm not doing as well as so-and-so, or, and you're discontent? Everything we see around us in the natural world tempts us to be discontented. Complainers not only wallow in their own discontent, but they steal everyone else's joy. Can you think of any person that has nothing to do but complain that you've enjoyed being around? Well, if they're really attractive and smart and have enough good points, maybe I can handle all of the excuses and the whining and the murmuring and complaining. Forget it.
Amen.
Because that is a relationship that will fail. Nobody can live around that kind of complaining day in and day out. Now, once in a while, Lynn says I complain, but I know better. I know better. I just have a better way of doing it. I have the spirit of seeing and knowing. I know what's wrong and how it's to be fixed. And so I'm not really complaining. I am just announcing the fact that there is something else that could be done, because I see more clearly than most people. But I'm not complaining. I mean, it's real easy for this thing to come on you. And it often does without you even being aware of it, because you always talk yourself out of, the things that you need to do to change. Let me give you a few things that are wrapped up in the spirit of complaint and complaining. Complaining forgets all that God has already done. It forgets everything He's already done. You wouldn't be a quarter of a tenth as well off as you are now if God hadn't already done a great deal in your life. Even if you just got saved yesterday, you've seen some things to make you realize, wow, where would I be if He hasn't at least done this? And complaining makes you to forget all the good things. Now, you're to forget the bad things. God says to forget that which is past. But there's one thing He says not to forget, and that's those great flight of afflictions where God showed up and did something for you. Cast not therefore away thy confidence. And complaining tends to make you forget those good things. And of course, it even glorifies some of the times of captivity you were in. Just like the children of Israel. Oh, but we were back in Egypt where we could eat to our full, and I missed the leeks. I want some more leeks. It even glorifies the past when you were in captivity, not good stuff. I can't tell you. Well, I guess I could tell you. Maybe 4 or 5 different people I can remember in years past that were having marriage problems, and I used to counsel those things. Thank God for deliverance from that. Somebody else can do that now. Not that I'm not compassionate, but, it's a he said, she said type deal. And, on several occasions I heard the comment that I should have married my old sweetheart. Oh. But, and there's that point of comparison, hearkening back to how good it was. Forget it. All of the reasons you didn't marry that jerk to begin with. But, What? I never liked that guy anyway. But basically, you have to, a complainer complaining always, forgets the past or papers it over so it looks really good and makes it sound really good. Complaining also focuses on the wrong targets, obviously. It focuses on what you don't have right now, as opposed to what God says He'll give you. As opposed to what God says He'll do, it focuses you on, what the natural circumstance is right now. And that's the wrong place to be focused. Complaint holds on to, beautifies past bondages. Complaint leads only to failure, 1 Corinthians 10:10. And if you were to turn over there, which we're not going to take the time to do, I don't know if they got that one or not, but okay, they don't. But it says, they died in the... Put that up there for a minute, please. Let me, so I don't misread it. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured. And this is when we're told, therefore our example. They murmured, some of them murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. They never made it into the land of promise. They died short of the land of more than enough. And, it wasn't the Lord that took them. It was the destroyer that took them. So murmuring and complaining opens you to the enemy of your soul. And if murmuring and complaining is rooted in discontent, then that spirit of discontent with your current condition of life is going to take you to a place of destruction, at least in that area of your life. It'll destroy that relationship. But at any rate, the only solution is manna. The evidence of transformation that manna is having its proper effect will be the disappearance of discontent. Those areas of hunger that Jesus said you would not have if you came to Him, partook of the life that is in Him. Those areas of hunger which, are another way of talking about this is an area where discontent resides. I'm hungry for something I don't have. I'm discontented with what I do. I love Jesse's sermon last week when he talked about the difference between temptation and manifestation. And when he used the example of Jesus being led into the wilderness. Well, we got a wilderness we're talking about too. To be tempted of the devil, and it was for the purpose of, the Lord's not going to give the devil the respect of taking Jesus around any of these issues. He went to the wilderness and was a-hungered. That's when the temptation came. When you're really hungry for something. When you're hungry for this relationship that you don't think you have. When you hunger for a life that you want but seems out of your grasp at the moment. You may have even believed for it for a long time. When you hunger for the financial success that others seem to have. When you hunger, the enemy will come and he will make an effort to get you to act on that hunger in some way other than taking the manna. Amen. Partaking of the manna. True. And that means getting it done yourself. Well, everybody else I know is, sleeping together before marriage just to make sure they're sexually compatible. Everybody does that now. This is old hat that, you need to contain sex within marriage. Everybody fudges a little bit on their taxes. Everybody. If they have an opportunity to get ahead in business, well, maybe cut a few corners of character in order to do it. Anytime your discontent or your hunger drives you to take up the matter yourself in a way that is contrary to what God says would be best for you, you're going to die in the wilderness short of the promise of God. Or that relationship will die short of the promise of God. Or that business will die short of the promise of God. So let's talk for a moment about what do we learn from the lessons we see regarding the giving of manna and the children of Israel living in that place for 40 years. And it got them all the way to their land of promise. Even though a lot of disobedience, a lot of problems along the way, lengthened their trip considerably, ultimately it was the manna that saw them through to the place where they are now ready to enter the land of more than enough. So, what is it about the taking of the manna? We see that it needs to be in the morning. Now, I've always said, your private time with the Lord is your business. You should listen to the Word all day long if you can. If you can stay awake at night, if that's your time, you should listen to it. And that's fine, as long as you understand this isn't partaking of manna. This is simply hearing the Word, which will build faith. I've come to believe that if you don't start your day with time with the Lord, those are the days that for me go down the tubes. Those are the days where I have more difficulty and more trouble than I have ever had on days where I spent plenty of time with the Lord. And the amount of time that you spend, the amount of word that you consume is going to be just as unique to your need as the actual manna was to those people back then. Don't be saying, well, all my wife does is half an hour in the morning, and so that's all I need to do. Well, for what she's doing at that point in her life, maybe the call, the responsibility, or maybe the word level that she keeps is a normal matter, of course, the whole day. That's all she needs. But especially if you're going out into the world and you're going to be dealing with natural people and natural circumstance, and you don't get your manna in the morning, you don't get your fill of the Word and the amount of Word and partaking of that divine nature, because you need to believe for that you need, then that day isn't going to work out well. And that's not only because of my personal experience, that's what it says here. If you want natural sustenance, if our, old covenant brothers, or whatever you want to call them, without them, we wouldn't be here. But, basically, if they wanted to survive the natural challenges of the wilderness, they had to eat. Otherwise, they'd get weak, and they didn't eat long enough, and they'd die. Well, that says something spiritually to us. You need manna every day. You can't do it 1 day, 2 days out of a week and say, well, hey, I know most people don't do it at all. And so I'm doing really good here. You need it every day, or spiritually you will wither, dry up, get weak, and eventually the enemy may have enough inroad into your life to take it prematurely. You need your manna every day. And the amount of manna you need needs to be honestly determined. How? By the level of discontent. You don't leave your time in the Word or with the Lord getting your morning manna until discontent is gone. You don't go into your day until you've got the peace of God garrisoning about your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. You don't go into your day until you go into your day fully aware of the fact that you are walking in the shoes of Jesus Christ. It is to be a demonstration of Him that the world around you sees. And most of my life hadn't been spent that way, even as a preacher, because these things get squeezed out in a busy schedule every day. You're just too tired. You worked all day yesterday. You could barely stay awake into bedtime. You slept too long to be able to spend any significant time with the Lord, and so you're out the door. That happened to me all the time, and I'd say to Lynn, pray for me today. Yeah, right. Pray for me to get a revelation of what I need to do. But basically, it's so easy, and particularly when you're, naturally speaking, results-oriented. You want to see things happen a certain way. I'm not saying you should not make your best effort, but don't do so at the expense of your manna. I see some people that are just kind of ho-humming. Let me tell you, you want a key to seeing the hand of God have his way in your life? This is it. That you stay with him in the morning until that spirit of discontent, until the unease and lack of unrest, until the unbelief, until those negatives, until the fear subsides. Discontent and fear always go hand in hand. You're discontented because you fear something ain't going to happen that you believe you need. So you better get in there and do it yourself. But when these elements begin to recede and you begin to feel the peace of God and the joy of the Lord, okay, you're ready. You can be a world changer today. Today, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you.
Thank you, Lord.
Today, you're more than a conqueror. Today. What day is that? The day that you get your manna in the morning. If you wait beyond the morning, the heat of the day, it'll melt away. And that's true of the pressure and the heat, of circumstance that comes on you as your day unfolds. Pretty soon, the word that you meant to ingest, the life you meant to partake of, you waited too long, didn't give it enough time perhaps, and now, you're too overcome by the circumstance that surrounds you. Get it. First thing in the morning, when you're fresh, give God the best part of your day. Do it then. And that spirit of discontent will leave. Because if you let it stay there, it'll produce hunger that will drive you into the place of, I'm doing it myself. And that part of your life, that relationship, that business, that financial endeavor will die in the wilderness, short of the promise of God. That's what we see in the Bible. This isn't news to anybody, because if you've been in this church more than, or any good church that preaches the word more than a very short while, you will understand the importance of what I'm saying to you now. It isn't just about reprogramming your value system, which was one of the things that a slave needed to do to get out of captivity. We've already been there. You need to produce a new set of values that you live by. It's not the world's way. It's not okay to take life wherever you want to go. And God's grace will take care of everything else. Hey, his grace will. Ultimately, you're going to go to heaven if you love Jesus. But your life on this earth is going to be a living hell. Otherwise, all anybody would have to do is get saved, and everything going to be hunky-dory. From now on, all right, I got it. No, that's not grace. Grace is God's provision that has been freely given. The real you, the spiritual you, is in reality a lot of things that you haven't seen in the natural yet. But that's the real you, and when you get home to be with the Lord, everything will conform to the standard that God has set, physically as well as spiritually. But on this earth, you got to understand, you have to understand the forces you're dealing with and that you have to work with. Discontent is deadly. You cannot let it remain in you. Okay, I was going to end here, but I can't stand it. Let's look at one more passage. 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6. And I guess we'll look at verse 6. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Let me see the amplified of that. And it is indeed a source of immense profit. For godliness accompanied with contentment, and then parenthetically, that contentment, which is a sense of inward sufficiency, is great and abundant gain. Well, what's the profit? What's the gain? That's the land of more than enough. That's how you get to an abundance beyond what you can ask or think. That's the land of more than enough. And he's saying, you want to experience the covenant promise of God for your land of more than enough? Godliness simply means a lifestyle of loving and fearing God and conforming your life to the best of your ability to His Word. It's much different than holiness, not the same thing. And he says, when you understand that, and you partake of the divine nature, and it begins to change your paradigms of life, and your behavior begins to change, then combined with contentment, a sense of inward sufficiency, that means it doesn't matter if you don't have it yet or not. You hadn't found that person yet. You haven't found that business idea yet. You haven't made the money yet. You haven't got the healing yet. Whatever it is, you're going to experience immense profit when you get to a place where you say, I'm content. I am inwardly sufficient because I know God has done this and provided it for me.
Hallelujah. Yes,
Amen. We see it again. We see it again in, that would be Hebrews 13, I believe. Hebrews 13:5. Let your manner of life be without covetousness, and be content, inwardly sufficient, with such things as you have. For he hath said, and this is the basis of being inwardly sufficient, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. When you have partaken of the divine nature to the degree that you should, when you have eaten your heavenly manna every morning, you will know that He'll never leave you, He'll never forsake you, that contentment itself will open the land of promise to you, the land of more than enough. Then you have this sense of inward sufficiency. Doesn't matter what the balance sheet says, the financial statement says, doesn't matter what the cash flow is, doesn't matter. Yeah, I may not see how what I need, what I'm hungry for, is going to show up. But I know this, if I spend enough time consuming the right portion of manna for me every day, then I can rest with the inward sufficiency that I'm going to experience immense profit, more than enough love, more than enough joy, more than enough health, more than enough good relationships, more than enough finances. Because godliness with contentment is great gain. Eat your manna in the morning. Amen.